you noted in the matter of Lisa Cook, quote, so at this point, the immediate onus is on Jerome Powell, the Fed chairman. He has the right, I would say the obligation, to say, show me the legal basis for this action. If Trump's officials can't provide that basis, he should declare that as far as he's concerned, Cook is still a federal governor. I could not, and I'm going to speak for Simone for just a nanosecond, because I know she agrees with this, agree with you more on this point. We have been making this point since this story broke, that the Fed chair, in my estimation, needs to step up, needs to man up and stand with one of his governors who's under attack, because he knows damn well what Donald Trump is up to. How do we know? How does he know? Because he's gone after Trump. So help us understand why the reticence, why sort of the official bureaucratic BS speak in these pronouncements relative to Cook, when just a couple of weeks ago he was doing the tango with Donald Trump and looking at pieces of paper and fact-checking the president. Now he ain't fact-checking anything.
Yeah, the Fed they cultivate this position of being apolitical, which, normally makes sense. And Fed statements tend to be a little bit hard to parse always. And the Fed did issue a statement which could be interpreted as saying that Lisa Cook holds the job until you show us, until the court rules she doesn't. But it didn't exactly say that. It was very Fed-like, and I would say that Powell is really falling down on the job here. He needs to stand up and say, look, if you have a good, solid reason for this, tell us, but nothing that we've seen. If they had real evidence of malfeasance on Cook's part, where is it? We haven't seen a thing. All we have is allegations and insinuations, and none of them are relevant to her job. You can fire a Fed governor for cause. Now, for cause usually means something like you're drinking on the job or you're embezzling from the organization's funds. Now, they're claiming, again, without any evidence, that she made some misstatements in transactions back when she was a professor at Michigan State. So I really do think that Powell has failed at least phase one of the test.
I was going to say the Merrick Garland of Fed policy, but go ahead.
And Mr. Krugman, I think that what you're outlining here is that, right, there's no claims of impropriety on Lisa Cook's part here within the Fed in her role and her tenure. But I found another part of your Substack interesting where you referenced President Erdogan of Turkey back in 2021, firing multiple central bank policymakers at the time and the economic implications that it had on Turkey. Could you kind of outline countries that have, autonomous central banks versus the countries in which they are politically driven or dictated?
Well, if you want to think about central banks that are under political control, Turkey is the current prime example, but Venezuela, Argentina at various points in its history. You can even go back. There was a time when Britain had, when the Bank of England was just part of their Treasury Department, in effect, and they abused it terribly. They had well before the rest of us experienced inflation of the 70s, the Brits had a runaway inflation, and they ended up eventually making the Bank of England, which is the equivalent of the Federal Reserve, legally independent. They said, we realize what happens when politicians get their hands on this. It's the temptation to abuse that power is just too great. So we're going to remove that temptation. And, this is Britain. And these were politicians who were unwise, but they weren't completely crazy. We don't need to speculate about whether Trump will do irresponsible things because he's demanding right now that the Fed do crazily irresponsible things. We're in a situation now where inflation is running a bit hot and looks like it's going to run hotter. And he wants the Fed to cut interest rates by 3 percentage points, which is completely insane. President Erdogan got Turkey's inflation rate up to 80% before he started to get a little bit rational. I don't quite expect Trump to give him a run for the money, but he might.
The Atlantic had a article on Tuesday, and the headline was "The Lisa Cook case could be the whole ball game." This is what they wrote: "The consequences of Trump taking over the Fed are hard to predict, but history is not encouraging. In 1970, Richard Nixon, who wanted a rate cut to juice the economy ahead of his 1972 re-election campaign, tapped Arthur Burns, one of his top economic aides, as Fed chair. Under Burns, the Fed delivered. That move is now widely seen as contributing to the double-digit inflation spike that roiled the country during the 70s and ended only after a new Fed chair came in and raised interest rates enough to trigger a recession." This is why I keep saying it's not just about Lisa Cook. It's about all of us. It is literally about our economy. However, the president has zeroed in on Lisa Cook. And I'm going to say, Paul, I was just so elated to read what you were writing because you have been right on the money. But there were so many people within our media apparatus who, when the president first announced his attempt to fire Governor Cook, folks said, well, she really hasn't spoken to the allegations. I think that's a mistake. Media folks. Well, she spoke through her lawyers today. And I don't understand how so many people within the media apparatus have taken the bait. The lady went through a very contentious confirmation process. You think this would have come up?
Yeah, no, we have nothing. Even if, I don't think we should even dignify this by trying to discuss the allegations, because whatever they are, they're completely irrelevant to the case. Mm-hmm. And what you really want to say is it's not just that if Trump manages to fire Lisa Cook, that he's gotten himself an extra seat at the Fed. The way he's firing her is saying, if you stand in my way, I will ruin you personally. Mm-hmm. I will go after you. I will destroy your life. Mm-hmm. And that's it. So this is a intimidation aimed at every member of the Fed Board of Governors. It's intimidation aimed at federal officials everywhere. It is saying that it's not just that we'll find a way to fire you. It is that we are going to actually destroy things. We're going to, we'll mess you up. Nice life you had there. Shame if something happened to it. And this must not stand.